Hello everyone. Today it's Saturday, September 26th in the year 2020. A year that will live in infamy. Anyways, lots of stuff to talk about, and it's Saturday. It's a relaxed day. Doing a bit of work out in my balcony garden. And I'm just sort of in my comfortable, gear, my t-shirt, my lovely hoodie, which is also comfortable. It's a lovely, lovely day here today. It's really lovely and sunny. I just had a cup of coffee out on the balcony with my geraniums. And my cats, they always come out when I'm out there. It's interesting. If I'm not out there, they're out there a little bit, but no. Both Silas and Avery, they just like to hang around wherever I am, and then that's where they are. So, yeah, one particularly likes my chair. So if I'm not here for any length of time, guaranteed Silas the Gray will be in my chair, and then I have to kind of battle with them to get him out of there. So. Anyway, what I'd like to talk about today is, first of all, just to mention that you have to realize this is entirely a one-man show. It's just me. I don't have a Foley artist. I don't have someone handling the camera. Certainly not a makeup artist, that's for sure. And gosh, here I was all dressed up in my lawyer gear, and I never noticed, because like I say, I have no haberdasher on set and to come and see, oh, is his tie straight? And then I noticed in playing back the video, my tie was slightly crooked. Well, I guess we'll say it's symbolic, the crooked nature of lawyers in general. Yeah, why does somebody go into the law? It's just like, why does somebody become a dentist? It's the same reasoning. Oh, I can make a lot of money. It's all about the money. It's not about justice. Yeah, it's about just us, that certain entity that tends to predominate in the courts. I did mention that in the last video I did, episode 3, which was on Thursday. I guess I took Friday off. Well, I was busy Friday, so... Anyway, the first thing I want to talk about, because this is the El Primo topic, we have to discuss this, continue hammering home the information, the facts regarding this COVID-19 nonsense. Certificate of Vaccination ID is what some people are saying it stands for, COVID. But 97% or more, and it is actually likely more, but I'm giving it a conservative percentage figure here. 97% of the people supposedly succumbing to this supposed virus actually are dying from many other illnesses, prior illnesses. They're already sick to begin with, some with many more than one illness. And one of the illnesses, or general category of illnesses that are primarily the ones dying, are cardiovascular diseases. And so this is a very interesting observation, because in the 1950s, when the entity began to figure out how to get rid of a very toxic carcinogen called hexafluorosilicic acid. It was coming out of the atomic bomb manufacturing, which of course is Jew science, and out of the development of aluminum. Aluminum manufacturing produces a lot of that as a byproduct, and so does fertilizer manufacturing. And so the scrapings of the chimneys of fertilizer plants, that is the primary source of the what they call fluoride, but it is actually hexafluorosilicic acid. It's also known as hydrofluorosilicic acid, or fluoride sulfate. Yeah, it goes by several names, but they've made it simple, fluoride, because, well, fluorine occurs in the environment, don't you know? And, it gets people not thinking about what actually that stuff is that's in the drinking water. It's actually a highly toxic carcinogen. It's considered to be the primary cause of premature death. Yeah, and so just that alone, for city councils to allow that to be done to the potable water of the city, town, or village, really, that is actually a war crime, since that byproduct of industry is a weapons grade neurotoxin, according to the Lancet Neurological Journal, and that was indicated some years ago in an article in that magazine. So it's cardiovascular diseases are really seriously killing people, and the reason is the fluoridation of the drinking water, and that fluoridation also causes not only cardiovascular diseases, but Alzheimer's issues are connected with it, joint issues, exacerbated arthritic type issues, a lot of people in pain and suffering because of the fluoride in the drinking water. And it also calcifies the pineal gland. And of course, that alone is a seriously criminal act, to calcify deliberately our pineal glands. And subsequently, what also happens is that people are made more docile. Their warrior sort of spirit tends to be compromised, and it is connected with fluoridation. So that's a bit of a history of fluoride. It was in around 1957 in New England when the so-called studies came out to say, oh yeah, if we put this in the drinking water, the dental health of 5 to 9-year-olds will be marginally improved. But the increasing incidence of cardiovascular diseases was completely omitted. There was no talk of that at all in those studies. And because people are so poorly educated to begin with, their logic and their ability to think and to be active against the entity which is trying to kill us overtly and destroy our lives. Well, for one thing, people are way too busy working at their jobs, just over broke situations. And that's really sad. But, the entity which owns most of the industry, they laugh as they sit around and say, oh yeah, the goyim, they want jobs, so we give them jobs. But then, of course, they rake upwards of 70% or more off those wages that the average person makes, which is... In Canada, it's estimated that people are left with about 23%. About 23% of what they have actually expended in terms of their energy, their brain power, and so forth. Their contributions to the betterment of our society, they're left with 23% ultimately, and most people are living check to check and just barely making it month to month. In fact, for most people, there's way too much month left at the end of the paycheck, truly. It is, mortgages are what they are, rents are what they are. Rent consumes a huge percentage of people's income. If they were left with all of their income, then people could more easily afford all the wonderful things that life has to offer here. Travel and, collecting of art and literature, going to school, all of that. Subsequently, as a result, the economy would be absolutely staggering in terms of its, productivity, its dynamism, the incredible power that would then be generated, because, of course, there would be so much more incentive in people to work and perform and, make things way better. But it's because of the entity I mean, even when you go to the grocery store, take a look at the stuff on the shelves. A lot of the things will contain a little U or a little K in a circle or some other little symbol. There's quite a list of them, but those are the primary ones, the little U and the little K in a circle. That indicates that the item that you're buying, part of the price is deducted as a tax that is collected by and for Israel. I mean, the entity's got you even, with your groceries sucking you. And so that's all part of the tax percentage that I was just quoting. So you're left with 23%, and some of it that you're paying in taxes goes directly to Israel to support a rogue nation of criminals, thugs, perverts, cannibals. Oh yeah, believe it. Wall humpers. They literally, that is what they're doing. If you didn't know this before, but you see all these human crows standing there bobbing and thrusting their pelvis at this old Roman wall and in Jerusalem. And they're humping that wall. They literally are humping the wall. They're not human, folks. Get used to it. They're not human. Okay. I'm watching the clock now, so I'm going to be doing this in about 20-minute little units. And so and I will then try to connect all of this stuff, in some kind of neat, and perhaps I might even add a little bit of Foley effects and so forth, as I did in the last one, episode 3. But anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm Gert-Jan Zwigelaar, or Gert-Jan Zwigelaar. There's some different ways to pronounce my name in English. Gert-Jan actually is the way most people pronounce my first name, Gert-Jan. But it is, as you can see how it's spelled, it indicates that in English we are again going through a vowel shift and a consonant shift. And the last time we saw that was around the 14th, 15th centuries, actually all over Europe. So you look at how the E in Gert-Jan, Gert-Jan, it has a U sound, and the TJ comes out as a CH, Gert-Jan. And then the E, again, Gert-Jan. It isn't not Gert-Jan, as it should be. And Gert-Jan is the correct pronunciation in Dutch. So, Dutch and English, there's actually a connection there, which is interesting. Old Frisian is... Friesland is a province of the Netherlands, and Old Frisian is one of the languages that is a foundation language of English, actually. All right, I'll Old Frisian, base language. The study of English is actually a very interesting course. I did a history of English at the University of Alberta class, and I found that highly interesting. And we learned to kind of read a little bit of Old English and, of course, Middle English. We all know pretty much, those of us who got to study Chaucer's Pilgrim's Progress, for example. That was on a lot of the English curricula, English literature curricula. When I went to high school, we had an English grammar class separately from an English literature class, which is a very good thing. Grammar was boring. Couldn't believe how boring that was. But again, a lot of the stuff that's done in school is deliberately boring, and it tends to weaken those minds. Eventually children kind of get turned off, and it's all so boring, And so they don't really learn to be grammarians, I would think. That should come a bit earlier, but just from proper presentation of English in the classroom, the way the teacher presents the material, the way the teacher speaks. But bottom line, I'm not a big fan of public schooling. I think that if you have the opportunity, and it isn't an onerous task really, is to homeschool your children and start pushing back against the onerous taxation systems which require now both mom and dad to be working and the children to be raised by others, and then eventually brought into a public school system where their minds are pretty much, by and large, there's a amount of significant amount of destruction that is done there. And so, yeah, stay away from the public school system if you can. Trust me about that. I was a teacher for 20 years in the system until I woke up and found out what actually is going on there. And so if I was to do it over again, it's not a place I would send my children. But fortunately, they seemingly turned out okay, at least I think so. The oldest, my stepdaughter, is a scholar at Dalhousie. My middle daughter is a practicing artist who has quite a portfolio already developed of ceramic work and a clientele for her work, and the mother of 3 marvelous children. And my son is an amazing entrepreneur and doing very, very well, very successful young man. So, he's known to be extremely intelligent by his friends, and so he does have something of his mother, I think. Yeah, that's really great. So, I was listening to Max Egan here on his broadcast that was published on the 25th, and Max was talking about how, the lockdowns and the masks and the oxymoron social distancing. In fact, here in Red Deer, there are 2 signs I found so far that says, please use social distancing. Please use social distancing. Now, what happens when you use that up? I wonder. It's absolutely bizarre. Please use social distancing. I've never thought about using it. I think about practicing it, but I'm not so sure about using it. So again, it just shows you the level of intelligence that is displayed there by the powers that be, in this particular case, city council. I mean, these are city signs, and city council would have had to look at that text and said, oh yeah, okay, go ahead, print it. Well, that shows you that they're not that literate, I think. Okay, so behavioral modification, and that's what Max Egan was talking about. Indeed, that is what is going on, is that they are hard at modifying everyone's behavior, and if they get away with this 5-year plan, say, where they've got the children right from kindergarten on up, masked and penned and distanced and all of that, within 5 years they will have let's say a population, the up and coming population, that within about 20 years on will then be the population that is completely under the control and completely a part of a international Borg, a cyborg of some kind. They'll all be chipped, and they will totally acquiesce to being chipped. In fact, they will have no choice. They'll likely be chipped right at birth. But the people will now be so totally completely modified in their thinking, in their behavior, in their acquiescence to the authority, Big Brother. Yeah, that's what's coming down, and indeed, what is coming down in order to further push that agenda quicker is a global Holodomor. They are going to try and starve most people to death, because that's actually the cheapest way to kill people. It's also extremely agonizing, and the entity really gets off on creating that kind of a negative energy. believe it. That is what is going on. The entity isn't human. It's an alien infestation of soulless chameleons, and then they operate as a hive-minded entity. These creatures, they, unlike us, they get their jollies off pain and suffering of others, putting their boot on the face of a goyim, of a Gentile. They are people of the moon, just like vampires. Their day starts at midnight, you see. So they're lunatics. They're lunatics by definition. Yeah, I've been thought of as a lunatic from time to time too, but believe me, my day does not start at midnight. No, midnight I'm usually, yeah. Okay, all right, COVID-19, likely you all know this, the plan was already begun some 50 years ago. So it's a long time in the making. Now, you've heard several people out there already saying when they talk about Bill Clinton, they preface the bill with kill Bill Gates. Well, I don't know, what else should we really do with regard to that creature? You know, here's a guy who basically defrauded somebody, or, you know, yeah, I think he defrauded somebody. He bought an operating system, claimed it pretty much as his own, DOS, and sold it to IBM at $30 per computer that IBM was producing, and all other Windows computers, they, at the time that Microsoft was started, were paying $30 royalties per unit for the DOS operating system and then Windows. So that's how that creature amassed a huge fortune. Eventually he acquired a creature called Melinda, and so the two creatures together, and of a connection to the entity, being tentacles of the international parasite, those two, they are now hell-bent upon vaccinating everyone on Earth, of course with the exception of the Jews and perhaps some of their special pets, you know, the black pets that they like so much. And they drive around in Ferraris and so forth, rubbing our faces in it. Those of us who are descendants of Atlantis and other high-minded ancient civilizations. Indeed, gingers are many of the mummies that are discovered in ancient Egypt. The ancient Gippos were actually white-skinned, ginger-haired people. And if they appeared dark, it's because they did have a kind of a sunscreen that they would put on in order to protect themselves from the scorching heat of that Saharan region. But yeah, another story. So kill Bill. Yeah, we shouldn't just kill Bill. Given that his program of vaccinations in India resulted in some 460,000 children being paralyzed. I mean, that alone should give Bill essentially that should give us actually the reason to do something about Bill, not just put him in a cell. I just think he deserves something far worse than that. But to make it easy on him, we can just hang him. No, he and Melinda both. Because what they're advocating is mass murder. And they have already basically done that. They did a terrible thing in Africa, apparently. And a lot of children in Africa have been compromised. And, you know, God help them, they were compromised already to begin with. And then, yeah. Anyway, that's a terrible, terrible situation, and Bill Gates, of course, is not the only one. And if you watch a previous episode, you'll hear a few more names mentioned, and a little bit more discussion regarding what should happen to the traitors that have dragged us into this complete and ridiculous covidocaust, as I call it. So many people suffering now, so many people's committing suicide already over this, and then the draconian reactions of the policy enforcement goons. You see it very clearly played out in Australia now, which is basically a test nation, and the state of Victoria is the focus of that. And you see that these creatures, trained by Israeli security goons, the IDF or Mossad agents, trained to treat the civilians as enemy combatants. Look at how they literally slamming women into the ground. I saw a video here of a young white woman who was watching a sports event being dragged off by a gigantic gorilla hybrid, Oh yeah, Negroes hate whitey because they all, being simple-minded, they are the true goyim, actually, in my opinion. But we really need them on side. But try to reason with them. It's got stuck in their brain that all people with white skin are the enemy, but they don't differentiate between the Neanderthals, between the. Take a look at some of those tentacles of the international parasite. Look at Jeffrey Epstein, for example. Like, there is a absolute quintessential Neanderthal, actually, and you can see those kind of facial features exhibited in many of the tentacles. They are actually also Neanderthals. So my opinion is that the Ashkenazi bloodline is with various say concentrations of the mixture, having come from Khazaria initially, where we see Huns, Mongols, Tartars, Turks, Draconians, and remnants of the ancient Neanderthals, all essentially in a stew pot that developed into the Ashkenazi, and all those blood groups that I named. That was some of the most sanguine DNA on the planet. These people are absolutely ruthless, soulless humanoids. But as I said, I think they're aliens. They're not human. And some of the rabbis even admit that. They said, yeah, they're not human. We come from out there. They point to the sky. And my thinking is they are likely pointing in the direction of the star system Draco. It's a good idea to start stocking up on non-perishables, canned goods, and so forth. But be careful if you're buying a large quantity. Perhaps don't use your points card, because they've been tracking your purchases for a long time, air miles and club cards and so forth. So they know what your buying patterns are, what your buying habits are. And if you now suddenly start buying huge quantities of goods, they'll know. And then when the proclamation is made regarding hoarding food, they will know who's got food hoarded, and they'll come and get it, just like they did in the Ukraine during the Holodomor there, 1932 to 33, when upwards of 10 million or more were starved to death by the entity. I take so much exception to that. That's why I really hate them, I really do. When people are starving, they will do anything. Yeah, it's interesting how some of us are not afraid to use the J word and all of that. Others they say things like, "Oh, the men with little hats," as I heard Max refer to the entity, the men with little hats. Yeah. No, I call a Jew a Jew. I call him a communist and a Satanist and a parasite and a tentacle. Okay, so let's have a look at something more I wanted to talk about. Planet as a corporation. Okay, so stocking up on food. An idea was posed, which I thought was interesting, the idea that the entire planet is essentially a corporation. And I think that really is kind of where we're heading. I thought that already 30 years ago as I saw that. As you know, more and more companies were amalgamating and acquiring other companies, and I was seeing it, you know, just like, for example, in the telecommunications industry. Apparently it's what, 6 or 7 some people own all of that. Yeah, and they happen to be all Jews. Oh no, it's not the Jews, it's not the... Yes, it is the Jews. What's going on is, of course, as you all know, I'm singing to the choir, you know, but perhaps there are some ideas that I'm presenting that might just, you know, click and help you to perhaps discuss these ideas with other people. Hopefully we wake some people up in time. But we have a timeline from 2020 to 2025. Yeah, is the global reprogramming process. So I've already talked about that. 5-year plans, we saw those effected by Stalin in the Soviet Union. USSR, they had these 5 and 10-year plans. Well, we got a 5-year plan on the table. Communism, of course, as you know, Satanism, which is Judaism, it's all the same thing. And out of that group comes something called Chekists. And you take a look at Justin Trudeau, and he looks like a quintessential little Chekist. And he's whammed. He's banged from both sides. His mother's Jewish and his dad is a Jew. So that wasn't Pierre Trudeau, it was Fidel Castro. And it's actually interesting about that because I recall very clearly when Margaret Trudeau had come back from Cuba and she was being interviewed on CBC, and it was asked of her, what did you think of Fidel Castro? And she literally gushed and she said, oh, he was quite a man, he's quite a man, like that. And of course I read right away what that was all about, and there we go. Eventually she birthed Justin, and you look at Justin Trudeau, there are photos showing younger Fidel and Justin Trudeau side by side, and you'd think they were, yeah, coming immediately or coming from exactly the same mold. But anyway, these Chekists, there's a film called The Chekist. You can Google that. It's a YouTube. It's an old Russian movie, but it is an accurate depiction of what we could very well be facing at the hands of these psychopaths. You know, if you were arrested by what I would consider a moderate Chekist group, that would be the group that's depicted in the film, you were lucky to just be shot. But if you were caught by one of the very, very, very psychopathic, very draconian lizard Chekists, Jews, then you could really suffer horribly. They could take hours, days to murder you. Yeah, and that's all a fact. And that's also very well documented, by the way. So if you haven't seen it, watch the film The Chekist, but it might be a good idea, don't eat beforehand, because if you have a sensitive stomach, it could actually be a bit unsettling for the stomach. And I caution you regarding, I just suggest that for those of you who are sensitive to subtitles not being really good. Sometimes the subtitles aren't really good and they're a little bit illegible, but it doesn't matter. It's not so much because what's going on is in the film, in the visuals anyway. But you'll get a very good idea of what we could very well be facing if we don't start fighting back immediately. Why do the Jews want to genocide the white race? And they've already been doing a good job. You know, we're that, 100 years ago, some suggest the white race comprised over 30% of the world's population, whereas now we're about 7% left. Now, I don't know, I haven't gone out to count them myself, so I'm trusting figures that I have read in more than one location. So the white race is being genocided, and of course we know who's responsible, and what is the reason? It's because we represent the only obstacle, essentially. They figure they don't need us anymore. We've, built the world what it is, high tech everything, skyscrapers, jet airplanes, rocket ships, high speed trains, all of it's all, Ferraris, it's all white people, Volkswagens, white people, Autobahns, white people. Huh? So, everybody steals from us. And then the others will jump up and down if, let's say, we put on a Kenyan shirt. Oh, that's cultural appropriation. As you're looking at the Negro wearing everything that was made and designed by white people, automobile he drives, well, white, that's all cultural appropriation, I would say. Everything that the Negro has, pretty much, is cultural appropriation, and mostly from white people. So they might have a Japanese lantern hanging in the porch of their hut. Oh no, they don't have porches. See what else. Yeah, well, if you have other opinions, my opinion is the best way to proceed is to start advocating rope therapy for the traders first. Let's start by, taking down the swamp creatures, and that needs to be done immediately. And of course, many of them are men with small hats, women too. But if they start to be taken care of in the way they should be taken care of, and it's just my opinion, let's deal with it finally. But if that is distasteful, then let's advocate an island and relegate them all to an island and surround it with our navies, and then just keep them all there, And I also advocate giving, since we're talking about relocation, I think it's a great idea if we advocate Negroes to go back to Africa. They all think so highly of Africa. They all want to be called African Canadians and African Americans and and so forth. Well, if they like Africa so much, then here we'll buy you a plane ticket. We'll give you some startup money, and you guys can all go back there and create your your cannibal dream, and then leave us white people alone. That's really, I think, would be a great thing. So that's something you can think about. Talking about the public fool system, I'll just give you a little personal story. When I first came to Canada in 1960, I couldn't speak very much English. I was a Dutch boy that grew up pretty feral. And here I was set back a grade because I couldn't speak English. So that was the first sort of blow. I had to start grade 3 over again. My first day at school at Oliver Elementary on 118th Street in Edmonton, 103rd Avenue. That little school, my first day. I'm an immigrant little kid, doesn't speak English. I can say yes, no, and crazy. That's it. My first day. And the children are playing baseball with a plastic baseball bat and a plastic ball. Just little kids, grade 3, 4, 5, something like that. And I've never played baseball. This is something that we didn't play in the Netherlands. And so I'm given the opportunity to hold the bat and stand at the plate, and then some big bully, grade 5 kid apparently comes over and basically pushes me aside to the ground and grabs the bat out of my hands. And I thought, well, that's not correct. And so I, got back to him and retrieved that bat out of his hands and proceeded to beat him with it. And I knew full well that I wasn't going to hurt him. I mean, I was already quite a bit older than these kids, or at their age group, so, being put back a grade, and plus I had to start when I was already 7 in the Netherlands because of the nature of the system there. You had to be 6 years old. Well, my birthday's in December, so my birthday I became, 7, and as I started school, so I was already essentially 2 years old. I knew full well I wasn't going to hurt him. I was just scaring the shit out of him, which he deserved. But I'm the one that got strapped. I got strapped for defending myself, for standing up for myself, and that was my introduction to the authoritarian, Dewey school programming, that public fool programming that exists in Canada. Don't defend yourself. We're seeing this in the States now, where these scumbags go after some white guy happens to be in the area in his car. They try to drag him out, whatever, but he fights back, and then he's the one that's arrested by these entities' policy enforcement units. These creatures that have no conscience, that just simply follow orders regardless of the morality. Yeah, and so they are also the enemy. But it's the Jew is completely creating the circumstances in the United States to warrant the imposition of martial law. And that's what they've been pushing all along. They don't care whether, people's property's burnt down, whatever. It's just the property of Goyim mostly. And those Negroes are even burning down stores belonging to fellow Negroes. But he's probably from a different tribe. So anyway, I was eventually molded, I think, into something of a pacifist for many, many years, until I started waking up in about 1998 and quit teaching in 2001, threw away a 6-figure job because I couldn't stomach the agenda any longer, and have been basically educating myself ever since. And now here I am, trying to share some of that information and some of that overstanding. Hopefully it helps you. In the case of you being, say, younger, quite a bit younger, that's really great, because it saves so much time when you have some older people like myself and, say, Jim Rizzoli or Max Egan, even Jeff Berwick, amazing Polly. I'm sure Polly is likely well into her 40s anyway, but she doesn't look it. She's gorgeous. But well-preserved lady and very smart. And these people, they all, have acquired information that you can greatly benefit from, because, us sharing what we know, it speeds up a lot. You don't have to read a whole ton of books. I guarantee you that a lot of the stuff that you see sitting on shelves in here, these are not fake backgrounds, and I've read a lot of this stuff. Pretty well all of it, actually. So I went from being sort of a peace, love, all of that kind of hippie, to now being essentially a warrior, because I recognize what the big picture is. I recognize what's at stake. And at some point in the way the world evolves, until we reach light in life, things are sometimes tumultuous, and sometimes in tumultuous circumstances, somewhat warrior-minded individuals are necessary to lead the charge, or we become totally destroyed. And if there's no white people here, this planet would not be quite so nice. It's interesting that there is a group in the States now, and they call them Black Americans for Donald Trump, which is great. Black Americans for Donald Trump. And we can have black universities, and a black Miss Black America contest, and black this and black that. The moment we said, white people for Donald Trump, oh my God, racists, monsters, oh, those are all a bunch of white supremacists. If we advocate white-only universities, oh my God, people, stop bowing down to that nonsense and start advocating white-only universities. Protect your children and your investment if you still choose to send them there. But I don't know. I'm not a big fan anymore of government institutions, albeit I enjoyed, being there. But The problem is that if you choose to take a degree in whatever, you're reading for a particular degree, especially in the undergraduate levels, a lot of courses are kind of dictated. So you're expected to take a smattering of this and that and the other thing, but some of those courses are really boring, really totally useless, but just a course necessary to keep some old aging tenured professor perhaps with bread and butter on his table, give him a reason for living. But gosh, there's so much stagnancy and the communists are pretty heavy in there. I mean I went through it. Now in retrospect I recognize who the commies were in my in my university programs. But I did enjoy it. I always enjoyed the intellectual sort of challenge, even though I didn't always agree with it. But like I say, if you have more choice and you can set up a program where every course you take is something that benefits you and you're interested in, it makes it way nicer than taking courses that you're saying, why the hell am I taking this course? So we have to stop as a race, as a people, we white people, we have to stop bowing our heads when somebody says we're racist for suggesting that we want to be with our own people and not be subjected to the sort of different cultural practices that are in some cases quite abhorrent to us, that are not where we're at, that are still practices that we saw in a pre-medieval time or in a much more primitive time when human sacrifices were still being conducted. I mean, as you well know, the Judaic entity not being human, they practice all kinds of bloody rituals, including the horrific torture, murder of babies, of white babies, our children, and bleeding them dry, and sucking that blood. And I mean, take a look at Nancy Pelosi. Speaking of that, Nancy Pelosi, I was watching a recent video of her. That woman's 80 years old. Do you look at her? Does she look like an 80-year-old woman? No. Why is that? What do you think? She's Jewish. Eh? She's a Jew. And she's sucking adrenochrome. I guarantee it. Yeah. Yeah, these people are total satanic minions. And they're not fully, well, they're not human, bottom line. And so I think it's high time that we start to organize ourselves and stop taking the bullshit and fight back. You know where these creatures live. You know where these creatures are. I'm not afraid to admonish you to consider rope therapy for these traitors, because they don't deserve anything else. They don't deserve to continue breathing our air, polluting our environment. Yeah, adding to the excrement pile at the local sewage plant. Yeah, that's what we have to stop. We've got too much of that excrement already, so we should remove the creatures that are adding to it that don't deserve to breathe for what they have done to us. So, okay, that's my take on things this Saturday, September the 26th. And I'm already making notes for the next episode, so this will be the end of episode 4. It's a bit of a ramble, but as we go along, these things will become probably more smooth and all of that. Who knows? At this time I ran out of battery, so good thing I have fresh batteries sitting. So I'll just conclude this. So with this talk about the homelessness here in Red Deer, and similar circumstances may even be the case in other places, take a look at that. But $138 million could buy over 400 3-bedroom bungalows at the sort of market price of such a unit here in Red Deer. A hotel was for sale for just under $7 million with 133 rooms. And yet we still have people dying in our bush here. And so where is that money? And then the other 300 and some million dollars that was part of that total package, so that would be 362 million, that money was apparently dispensed amongst some 60 agencies. And I've said this before, I've lived here since 1988. There are no 60 NGOs operating here. And so that money, they won't, City Hall won't divulge who got the money. Oh, you can look that up yourself. Yeah, I think what's happened is some $500 million has been essentially disappeared and is in the hands of the entity, guaranteed. And now they're going to be trying to get some of this $1 billion money that the federal government is putting up to deal with homelessness. But again, I repeat, it's the wrong approach. Yes, we need shelter for these people. Not everybody's homeless because they're lazy or incompetent or have no skills. Sometimes it happens, circumstances happen. There are people with university degrees who are very capable individuals, highly qualified, but there isn't any work for them. Eventually funds dry up, and the banks, they claim to be willing to work with people and so forth, but ultimately a banker's heart is as cold as a block of granite in the middle of winter. And so that generally is the case. And so what's happening is that the international banksters are buying up property, billions of dollars worth of property that people have had to default on mortgage payments, or basically have had to sell at fire sale prices just to get out from under. And eventually everything will be owned by the entity, and nothing will be available to any Gentile whatsoever. As you note, there isn't really, like, take Hollywood for example. Most of all the big names, actors and so forth in Hollywood, they're all Jews. The Gentiles, they can do some of the menial work, build the sets and whatever, drive the car for the rich Jew actor. But since they control everything, they definitely help their own, and they place them everywhere. Here the library, it's a little Jew that buys the books that go into the library. He sits there and makes those decisions, and subsequently not everybody's books are in there that should be in there. And a lot of books are being taken out of the library, which is interesting too, which I find is very strange. I mean, a library is something that acquires books. It doesn't get rid of books. You just keep, you build more shelves, you build an addition. That's the whole idea of a library. You don't just, like in what happened in San Francisco, when I was still having conversations with Jim Kirwan. But he, unfortunately, the building he lived in and all his stuff, I think, succumbed to a great fire. Things are bad in San Francisco, and this is some years ago. But he indicated that the university, or not the university, but the library there, the civic library, got rid of some million volumes or more, sent them out to the city dump. Yeah, so all these books were buried. Again, that is part of what the Jew does. He is rewriting history always. And that's the other thing about their so-called prophecies. Those generally were written after the fact. So, events would occur and then they'd write so they'd make it look like prophecy came true. It's hocus pocus. That's what they're very adept at. And that's why they have the world in their clutches to the extent that they do. At the present moment during this incredibly infamous year. It's absolutely insane. Here we are, 9 months into this covidocaust, and they're still breathing, the creatures responsible. But it's good to see that Mr. Trump isn't buying into a lot of the bullshit, and not buying into the bullshit publicly, which is really great. Okay, well, I think that's it for today. That's enough of me dealing with all this. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the camera only records like 20 minutes at a time and I have to get up and do, but you know, I'll try and do some decent editing and put this together as a somewhat of a coherent presentation for Saturday, September 26th. Okay, thanks a lot for watching, you guys, if you stayed with me this long. And you know, if you'd like to subscribe, well, you know the procedures, the subscribe button and the other button, and anyway, and you know, if you want to leave me some comments, that's always chill. I really like it when people comment. I do try to comment back. Well, I'm not receiving tons of comments yet, since I'm pretty new at this whole game. Albeit I've got a bunch of videos posted in BitChute, and some in Libry, LBRY, there's some in YouTube. You just punch in my name, whatever, you'll find them. BitChute in particular has quite a few videos, some of my illustrated music as well, which you might find entertaining. You know, if you're driving, you can just listen to the music. You know, you don't need to necessarily watch the video part of it. But I've illustrated some of my music, which you might find soothing and all that. You know, sit back in your chair and just watch the images as you listen to the music. But yeah, at some point, maybe in one of my presentations, I might play a little bit of music, sort of just mix it up a little bit, you know, kind of like a television, radio type program. I'm also discussing with my friend in Ecuador to maybe get on again a regular type of weekly talk show with him, and to maybe build up a little sizzle. Bryzer from Ireland called me up the other day, and we were chatting, and he is thinking for a Graham Hart show upcoming in a month or so, to have 3 Dutchmen and an Irishman on. And so myself, I've been invited to be part of that. I think possibly Captain Willem Velderhof might also be on the program. There's a name Bryzer mentioned. He's a very interesting man and a friend of mine as well. I'm not sure who the other Dutchman will be, but that will all be announced in the near future, so you can watch for that on Cornwall Radio, which I'm not sure if it's out on Eurofolk or not, but it's a Graham Hart show, so within a month or so, that's something to perhaps look forward to. And I will be on another radio program with Stephen Crawford, also upcoming, I think in another 2 or 3 weeks from now, and I will definitely let you know beforehand. As I am thinking that it's not so difficult to do these programs. It takes a while to edit and to process them and all that, and so I will be at that for pretty much the rest of the afternoon and maybe into the evening with regard to this particular presentation. But you know, as I go along and learn a bit more about this, you know, I'm starting to realize that you know, 20-minute segments in the recording process of this camera, it's all fine and dandy, but it does kind of break things up. So I may, you know, when the funds allow, to consider perhaps purchasing a video camera that can record a couple hours at a time, because I'm certainly capable of carrying on several hours or more of a presentation. In fact, I much prefer that anyway. Sometimes it's lovely to be able to just talk for 3 hours and get all the information presented that way. But not everybody has a concentration span that can last 3 hours, so you know, people would have to likely watch those videos in stages, I would suggest. Likely that's what would happen. But yeah, some people do like a long conversation, and especially nice when you're driving. You're on a trip of a few hours and you've got some interesting ideas being presented. It certainly beats listening to top 40 radio, which, I mean, that's pollution. Oh, golly, I hate that when, and I don't have the radio on in the car. And if I do, generally I'm listening to one of my own pieces, you know, one of my concertos or whatever. But I don't particularly care for the top 40 radio stuff, because then you sometimes get a piece of music comes into your brain and it forms sort of a loop in your brain, like it just starts, the neuron just start looping that sound or that melody or whatever, and you can't get rid of it, and just stays in there it's like a clog in your drain, and sometimes it's really hard to get rid of, and you have to really concentrate to do so, and so that's why I don't bother. And besides the radio stations that I used to listen to, CBC FM for example, it's becoming ever more a playground for homosexuals and other mentally ill people of the LGBTQ plus C persuasion. So it's a nut house, it's an asylum, and a lot of the information that they espouse is again part of the programming. So anyway, folks, that'll be it then. I'm broadcasting from my little apartment. Well, it's not that little actually, but from my place. And these are all actual books. These are real bookcases. I'm not putting up some phony background. And eventually you'll get a look around and see there's a lot of arts everywhere. I've just found, I think, a new location to put up some of my paintings, so that'll clear out a bit of space, because I just got way too much piled up in here, and it's looking for a gallery or looking for buyers. I'll show you some work, and then I'll give you some opportunities. If you are interested, you may be able to purchase one of my hand-painted images that are unique, original, and one of a kind, and not overly expensive either. I'm trying to price them to sell, because I've just, like I say, I've got way too much. I fetch good prices when I put work up for sale in a gallery, but generally they charge huge commissions, and I don't particularly like that either. So I will provide some work for you to see. And and then in the meantime, if you are interested to learn about the difference between common law and admiralty law, just remember this: the Red Pill, a handbook for the righteous, or how to beat the unrighteous at their own game. Just send me an email, write Red Pill in the subject line, and you can scoop me $50 in Skrill, S-K-R-I-L-L. That's a new pay platform since PayPal's cut me off. Basically too outspoken, and the snowflake Jews are way too scared of criticism because, of course, they know that our criticism is the truth, and their false narrative is falling apart by the day. So the Jew is really quite concerned about truth speakers, but you know, we can no longer pussyfoot around this any longer. It is time for the final solution, I think, to an infernal problem. Yeah, it's either us or it's them, and that is bottom line it. The lines are drawn. Okay, enough of that. Cheer up. Don't fall into fear, you guys. False evidence appearing real. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Until next time, maybe I'll make one tomorrow. I don't know. Tomorrow's Sunday. Perhaps I'll take a break. But you can certainly expect another presentation on Monday. Okay, you guys. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Ooh, peek, peek. Remember to turn off the camera. Bye all.